Welcome to Policy and Governance Perspectives, the official podcast of the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. Join Dr. David Ramadan and Schar School experts as they engage in thought-provoking conversations with elected officials, policymakers, and thought leaders. Listen for in-depth discussions on policies, politics, governance, and career pathways, all designed to elevate your perspectives and expand your mind.
Welcome to another episode of Policy and Governance Perspectives, the official podcast of the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. I'm your host, Dr. David Ramadan. The Virginia General Assembly is in session, and while most people are busy watching Washington, Richmond is making decisions that will directly affect public safety, the budget, and even the shape of Virginia's congressional map. Our guest today is Delegate Marcus Simon, who chairs the House Public Safety Committee and also serves on courts of justice, general laws, and rules. He has also become one of the General Assembly's most visible voices on redistricting, especially as Virginia voters now face a statewide referendum on a proposed constitutional amendment that would allow mid-decade congressional redistricting under certain conditions. As a matter of fact, we are recording this on March 7th. I know listeners, you're probably listening to it about 10 days or 2 weeks down from now, but voting on the redistricting started yesterday. Joining me as well is Greg Brandon, retired Navy commander and graduate student here at the Schar School. I am glad to have Greg with me, who is currently a student in my Government 510 graduate class this semester. Today, we'll keep it short and sharp. What's actually moving this session, what this redistricting fight is really about, and what students and citizens should be watching next. Delegate Simon, Greg, welcome. I had the honor and pleasure of serving with Marcus when I was in the General Assembly, and we've kept a good friendship throughout the years. So, Delegate Simon, as Chairman Simon now, good to have you with us.
Thanks. No, it's happy to be here, and I remember serving with you for a couple of cycles there, and the dynamic was a little bit different when we were together. You were part of that larger majority, and I was part of the actually at one point a truly super minority where we couldn't even sustain governor's vetoes. And the role of a delegate has changed. We can talk about that a little bit at some point. But being a member of the minority, you have a certain role to play. But when you take over and you have to govern, that role changes. And I've enjoyed being able to evolve with the General Assembly.
You know what? You opened it up, so let's start with that. True. When I was there, the Republicans, and I was a Republican at the time, no longer a Republican, the Republicans had in the House 67 out of 100 supermajority, which meant we could overrule a veto with 66 votes, having 67. Democrats were 33. Today, the Democrats have 64 in the House and Republicans have 34. So we're going to talk a little bit about your role now. Of course, a member of the majority, you're a chairman now of a very important committee, serve on 3 other very important committees. You just mentioned being now in the governing side versus a minority. Sure, let's start with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll tell you the first, a quick funny story. I remember, in the minority, we put in a lot of gun violence prevention bills, and I put in a bill about taking firearms away from people convicted of domestic abuse. And the state police and the sheriff's office came, they're like, we've got concerns about the details of your bill. People have to surrender their gun, but what do we do with it after that? How do we store it? How do they get it back? How do we receipt for it? And they're worried about the details. And I was like, guys, relax. This bill's not passing, right? There's no way I'm going to get this bill past a majority. I'm not sure why you're here. This is a big waste of time for all of us. A few years later, in 2017, when we took 16 seat swing to get to 49. When people come to visit me, I had to be a little more serious. I'm like, wait, this bill might actually become law. We should probably stop and think through all the implications. And now that we're in a majority with a trifecta, with a governor who's going to sign, the vast majority of the bills we send her way, there's a lot of weight to that, is what I sort of explained it. Things feel a lot heavier. I mean, one of the nice things about being in the minority is my job was to throw bombs and make trouble, look for opportunities to stick a pole in the gears and slow things down for you all, so you wouldn't just roll over us.
And you were pretty good at doing that.
I learned a lot doing that. And but now there's a lot of weight to the stuff we put in. We have to take it seriously, think very carefully about consequences intended and otherwise, and implementation. What does it look like to the agencies we're tasking with doing those things? What does it cost to do a lot of that? People get really frustrated sometimes when good policy ideas go to one of the two money committees and die, but that's not always because we don't want to do the policies, because there's a lot to absorb, and implementation is not always as simple as it sounds.
And that may not please at least the far left of your party at some point.
Yeah, I mean, the far left, even centrists who have good ideas, but we have to deal with the reality of, again, being in the governing party, having to pay for them. And there's something nice and fun, like I said, light about being on the opposite side. You get your wins by literally just by slowing something down. Making a bill go by for the day was a win when you were a 33-member minority. There's a lot of consequence, but it's also, look, there's a different kind of joy in that too, right? And being able to pass legislation that's meaningful will really change and affect people's lives in a positive way. There's joy to be gotten out of all of it. Some of it's a little more on the frivolity side or the fun-loving side of it. Some of it's more with that sense of accomplishment and satisfaction that comes with doing something hard, but significant and meaningful.
I agree wholeheartedly. People ask me all the time, "Do you miss it?" I said, I don't miss the process of getting elected, because that was a tough process, especially for me at the time and the area I'm in, and you know how expensive it is, Marcus.
Yep.
But I do miss two things. I miss being able to help people and pass stuff that does change people's life, and I miss the friendships. I miss the people I got to know from both sides of the aisle that I kept their friendships for years. All right. When our listeners are listening to this podcast, Chairman Simon, you would be towards the end of the session. And if they had ignored Richmond for the last 2 months, what are the 2 or 3 biggest issues that changes people's lives in Virginia that the General Assembly would have dealt with in 2026?
Well, one of the things you're going to notice a lot if you're somebody who rents a house, who doesn't necessarily own a home, but you're looking for housing, the leverage is going to be changed a lot. We've passed a lot of bills that affect the landlord-tenant relationship, and not in necessarily giant ways, but in ways where things tended to be a landlord-friendly state, and property rights are certainly important. We want to protect those, but there's a lot of consumer protections for landlords, or for tenants rather, and people that are in rental housing. So you'll find that you have, if you miss a payment on your rent, you've got more time to come up with the cash to pay that off. You're going to find that there are fewer fees for what we call junk fees. So every time you call maintenance to do a repair that the landlord's responsible for anyway, you won't see a charge for that on your next monthly statement. You can, if you want to pay by credit card or other charge, you won't necessarily have to pay a fee for that if the landlord doesn't give you any other way to make your rent payments. So that's something, again, if you're a landlord or a tenant, you need to be aware of those changes, right? Because coming down July 1st, your relationship with your tenants, if you're a landlord, your relationship with your landlord, if you're a tenant, is going to be changed a little bit, and you need to be aware of what we did there. And that's all, under the umbrella of, right, trying to make living in Virginia more affordable, more reasonable, more predictable, right? I know that ultimately, at the end of the day, it changes the economics, but you're not going to be surprised with a bunch of different fees and junk fees and things along the way. You're going to know how much your housing is going to cost. We thought that predictability was important. So the change in that landlord-tenant relationship, not getting a lot of press about it, but I think it's going to be pretty impactful. It would be my number one. My number 2 change, I think this hasn't really flown under the radar as much, but I do think that how your vote counts is going to be different. I think Virginia is, we were fairly, there were maybe 1 or 2 swing seats in Congress of the 11, maybe 1, that would be in play in most years, most midterm years. The map's going to look a lot different. You find your congressman driving up and down the coast if you're in the new 8th district from Alexandria down to Yorktown. If you're in the center of Fairfax, you can drive across Fairfax. I can drive from my house to George Mason. I'll probably drive across 3, maybe 4 congressional districts on that little 8-mile stretch of I-66.
For the record, you're not running for any of them, right?
Oh, they didn't tell me I was going to have to make news, but no, I am not. My wife is in the next room. If she even heard a whisper of me thinking about running, I'd be in big trouble.
So the redistricting is one of those largest issues that are coming up. We're going to talk about it in a minute. But before we move on to that, on the redistricting, and you mentioned affordable housing, what is the third top topic that you would put out?
So I think the way we approach public safety is going to be a little bit different, right? I think that you're going to see an emphasis on sort of getting to some of the root causes of public safety problems, as opposed to trying to deal with them after the fact with harsh sentences. That's sort of the philosophical difference. I think a lot of Republicans and frankly even some quote unquote law and order Democrats, believe that, hey, if we have really harsh sentences, mandatory minimum sentences, long time of jail, that will deter crime. I think that you're going to see more of one, certainly with gun violence, you're going to be looking at taking more proactive steps to make sure that people who shouldn't have firearms aren't able to get them, aren't able to access them, taking them out of households and situations where you have a dangerous person, whether it's due to their prior behavior or drug or alcohol addiction or other things, but being able to remove firearms from folks, and then certain types of weapons that really have no business being on our streets will be illegal come July 1st, whether that's importing new assault firearms or being able to purchase and manufacture what we call ghost guns, these unserialized firearms. Those won't be available in Virginia. And so I think, I believe, obviously I wouldn't be promoting this policy if I didn't believe them. I think we'll be a safer Commonwealth for those things. And we'll take a more sort of a public health approach to a lot of the problems of crime and criminal violence. A lot of the folks that are in our county jail are really suffering from mental illness, and many of your if you walk into your local county jails and see the number of people that are receiving mental health services while they're in jail, they essentially function as our largest mental health facilities in the Commonwealth in many jurisdictions.
Thank you for that. For the record, though, the new gun restrictions and weapon restrictions is only going forward, right? All that has been adjusted. People, whatever guns they own today that have been purchased legally up until July 1st will remain to be illegal in people's possession.
Yep, and that's why I talked about importing new ones, right? You're making me be explicit. I was trying to be a little subtle about it, but yes, that's right. I mean, nobody's going to have to give up. Nobody's, again, going from door to door collecting people's firearms from their cold dead hands, or otherwise, right? It's if you've got it, if you have a very large magazine, if you have a very powerful firearm, if it's got all kinds of extra features to it, currently you're allowed to have that. You can leave it to your children. You can give it to your immediate family members, but you can't sell it to somebody else, and you won't be able to purchase new ones and bring them into Virginia. The ghost guns is more of a blanket ban. That is you'll have an opportunity to get your unserialized firearms. So if you bought a kit, if you're a hobbyist, you bought one of these kits online because you thought it'd be fun to finish the gun yourself, you can keep that one as well, but you'll have to go to a federally licensed firearm dealer and have it serialized so that people understand where it was and where it came from and can trace it back, its ownership backwards if it's ever found to be used in a crime.
Excellent. Commander, I'm turning it over to you for a few questions to Chairman Simon.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ramadan. And just for the record, I retired as a lieutenant commander.
I'm still going to call you commander.
I know. Thank you very much.
We're governor too. It's the same thing. You always drop the LT in front when you drop the money.
Yeah, right. So with respect to public safety, with an ICE being in the communities and its effect on public safety, I think is real because immigrants, they're part of the nation. They're residents and they need to feel safe. And I think the presence of ICE doesn't make them feel safe. And speaking of, the jails being full of, people with mental health issues, if immigrants don't feel safe, then they won't feel safe, to identify someone who's having a mental health crisis. And so I was just wondering what the General Assembly has done or can do for that.
Sure. So we're going to address that in a couple different ways. There are sort of three big buckets, and really in the House, got this down to three big bills that all came through the public safety committee that I chair. So I've had a role in helping shape these policies and figuring out the nuances of some of these bills. But first, there's going to be a bill about where protect. We call it the Protected Places Bill, but as a sort of shorthand, and it will talk about where ICE is allowed to conduct activity here in Virginia, and it's going to say that we don't want them, and they're not able to do enforcement activities at public schools, public libraries, in courthouses, in other sort of sensitive places that are listed in the college campuses, for instance, without a judicial warrant for some sort of activity, right? They can't be running around with these what they call administrative warrants signed by themselves. Essentially, I decide that I found that I have probable cause, or you go to your buddy. It's like a car salesman where everybody's a manager. Right? I'm just going to get my manager to sign off on this warrant. So, and if they do conduct activities on these protected places, they're going to be liable for civil damages to the people that they impact and that they harm. And the Attorney General will also have authority to pursue civil damages against them. So we get a lot of questions about how can we even do this to ICE? There's a federal supremacy clause, and you can't tell them what to do. And that may be true on a criminal basis, but we can say, hey, you're going to be liable for your actions and for violating people's civil rights if you conduct it in any of these sensitive places. And we're going to try and pierce your sovereign immunity and allow folks to sue you personally for those things. So that's going to create a cause of action there. The second group is we're going to reform the way we do what these are called 287G, or these cooperation agreements between local police and jails and the federal officials. And we're going to require that these 287G agreements, any agreement that's entered into, follow certain ground rules about what is going to happen. So we're going to have a 287. If you have a 287G agreement, ICE will have to agree not to operate with masks on, to wear clothing that clearly identifies themselves as a federal agency and has a way, it may not be a name, but some sort of unique identifier that's visible to folks so they know who they're dealing with and who they're encountering. That's going to, again, they'll also have to agree to avoid these sensitive places if they're going to have an agreement. And they're also going to have to agree to use judicial warrants and judicial detainers before they pick anyone up. So I know that sounds like a lot, and there's some nuance to all of that, right? We're not banning 287G agreements. We're not saying you shall not cooperate with ICE, because frankly, we all want ICE to do their job and to do what was promised, right? Which is to, hey, seek out, find, and deport dangerous criminals. No one disagrees that we shouldn't have dangerous criminals on the streets, be they immigrants, illegal, whether they're here lawfully or unlawfully, whether they be U.S. citizens or not, frankly, right? And so we don't want to do anything that would interfere with the federal authorities' ability to exercise their proper role in seeking out folks that have deportation orders that have been deemed dangerous, have committed actual crimes, and pose a danger to health and safety. So instead of sort of banning these agreements, which some people have called for, which is sort of a simple answer, we've done the hard work to say that you can have the agreements, but within those agreements, we want you to make sure you meet certain minimum standards that the public expects from you. And then the third thing is about this whole masking generally. We're going to require all law enforcement in Virginia to adhere to a model policy about masks. And that's another one and this goes to our at the very top with Professor Ramadan. We're talking about, it's easy to sort of propose a policy, but then you start thinking about how to implement it. The first initial thought was, hey, let's just ban masks, period. And then the police came to us and say, well, what about motorcycle cops that wear face shields, right? I mean, don't we want them to be able to, of course you want to be able to do that, right? What about if you're dealing with somebody who's, sick and coughing all over you, should you be able to wear an N95 mask? Well, of course you should be able to do that. And so what if it's, again, you're a motorcycle cop and it's 18 degrees outside. Should you be able to wear, a knit mask over your face? Of course you can. So rather than just banning them, like, look, let's adopt a model policy and let's make sure that we get it right. We're not impeding, useful masking policies, but let's not wear masks for the sole purpose or the primary purpose of not letting people be able to tell who you are or that you're in fact law enforcement. So those are sort of the three big categories of things that we're passing legislation on. And the goal, frankly, is to keep law enforcement focused on, their core jobs. There was an incident a few weeks ago, right? A woman was stabbed to death, unfortunately, here in Fairfax County by someone who was an immigrant under a removal order, who'd been in and out of Fairfax County's jail 8 times, 4 times in just the last 12-month period. And in none of those cases did ICE issue a detainer and come and get this person from Fairfax County before his release. And it's not that we didn't tell him that we had him, right? And I've talked to Sheriff Kincaid about this, and everybody knew where he was, but ICE unfortunately was, I think, distracted on missions in Minnesota, surging on doing some of these high-profile, dress-up things that they're doing, and not focused on their really core activities. So we want police to be able to work on their core public safety functions, keep our communities safe, and not be distracted by trying to hit artificial quotas or do newsworthy things that get splashed across Fox News and other make headlines. Let's do the boring work of keeping folks safe, and that's what we want to keep folks focused on.
Yeah. Thanks.
So that was a bit of a filibuster of an answer. You probably have more questions, but you sort of like wind me up and I start to go.
No, that's what I wanted to hear. That is a thorough answer to this important question. Thank you.
So, preparing for this episode, Marcus, I thought of probably about 20 questions to ask, but then knowing you well and serving with you and knowing that you will filibuster some of these, I cut them down to like 4 or 5 of my mind that I'm going to go over. So, but no, that's fine. All right, let's talk a little bit about the redistricting. In plain English, what exactly y'all are proposing to do for our listeners to understand?
Sure. Well, we want to make sure that we level the playing field on a nationwide basis here, right? We're talking about a national election, and all these elections, for better or for worse. I know Tip O'Neill once said all politics was local. I think that paradigm's starting to shift, and a lot of what's happening here is a national, and a lot of these elections are really won and lost on national issues. And and President Trump knows this as well, and that's why he's gone from state to state, insisting that governors and state legislatures deliver him, quote unquote, right? Give me 5 seats. Go get me the seats. And with varying degrees of success, right? To their credit, I mean, the Indiana State Senate said no, right? And we'll see what the electoral consequences are for them. Unfortunately, and if everybody said no, I'd be happy to say no. We don't need to change it the way we do maps. If everybody were saying no to the president, I think we'd all be in a much better place. And I'd be thrilled not to have to be advocating for the redistricting process that's happening in Virginia. But the fact is that in Florida, in Ohio, in North Carolina, in Texas, to varying extents, Republican legislatures and Republican governors are answering the president's call, and they're promising to deliver him, or at least they're going to try, the seats that he's asked for. And so what we're doing here in Virginia is saying, well, here's a blue state with a blue trifecta. How can we sort of balance that out and level the playing field so that we get a Congress that reflects the will of the American people? And so what we're going to do is we're going to, and it's a temporary measure, we're going to have to, because we passed a redistricting commission and we put it into our Constitution back in 2020, we need a constitutional amendment that says, hey, for the rest of this decade, right? So until 2030, should another state do a mid-district redistricting act that results in changing the number of seats they have for a reason other than a court order, then Virginia is able to do the same thing. And so I think that trigger has probably been met at this point. And so we are going to, so we've done a couple of things to be really transparent about what we're doing. So we passed legislation in October, right before the election, and then again right after the election to create a constitutional amendment that would say for the rest of the decade, Virginia's General Assembly is free to draw congressional maps. We also went ahead and in the enabling legislation have already shown folks what that map would look like, right? And it's a map that carves Virginia up in a way that favors Democrats in 10 out of the 11 congressional districts. And so if the mood of the Commonwealth is similar to what we saw during our state elections last year, these based on past Democratic performance, this is a map that should result in 10 out of the 11 congressional districts being filled by Democratic candidates. That goes away at the end of 2030 after the new census. The redistricting will revert back to being done by the the redistricting commission. At that point, we hope President Trump will have served out his terms and will no longer be president and won't be able to ask for other states to fix their districts.
That's an excellent explanation of what's happening on the redistricting. Greg, you have a question or two on this?
Well, so it'll be 2026, if passed, 2028 and 2030.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And
because the elections, because the census happens during 2030, and by the time it's done, it won't be done in time to change the district. So that's always the case, that there'll be the election following that even year, that 0 year, that we get the new district.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big fan of efficiency, and it's sort of inefficient the way our congressional districts are now, particularly in Northern Virginia with 60 to 70% Democratic, and we can spread the wealth. But also, when I look at California with their 54 congressional districts, I looked at the before and after map in the Southern California area, and it was easier for them to spread the wealth and get things out into Riverside County and down into Orange County, which had already been turning a little blue. So I'm I guess it's just an observation.
Yeah, well, look, and it's resulted in some ugly looking districts up here, right? I mean, no doubt, right? We have the new 7th is what they call the lobster district, because the fact is that here in Virginia, we, as Democrats and Republicans, even though the state, like even in sort of our, I would say, most recent low point, where Glenn Youngkin was able to win by about 50,000 votes. So you can see we were arguably a 50-50 state, at that point. Although I think the last couple of elections we've shifted, to more Democratic. Where those votes are really concentrated in this urban crescent, and really the population of Virginia, a good chunk of it is inside the Beltway, right? And so to go get those Democratic votes to spread out, you have to send these fingers, as you would, right, into Northern Virginia, and you have these narrow bands of Northern Virginia that then spread out as you leave the metropolitan areas. Just because of our urban-rural divide is really pronounced here in Virginia. So it does have some odd-looking results. But, I'd say that the idea is to make sure that our national map, again, it's sort of like when we did redistricting, you looked at counties and things, you wanted to keep them together. But at the end of the day, even though we have an anti-gerrymandering amendment, the special masters who drew our state house seats, they were conscious of political realities. And one of their charges was not to create an overall map that favored or disfavored one political party or the other. And I'd argue that what we're doing with redistricting Virginia is to sort of do the same thing on a national scale, right? We want to have a map that doesn't unfairly favor the Republicans over Democrats, because we're doing redistricting one way in Virginia, and people are doing redistricting a whole nother way in the red states.
Was there any sort of wargaming, as far as the local effects here in Virginia?
Yes, as a former military person, but I was an Army JAG myself, right? So we always sort of red team, blue team these things, right? As we would say, and you want to think through all the different possible scenarios and then adjust. You look at what's happened to other places and look for their after action reports. And I mean, so yes, there's some thoughts about some potential problems. In fact, you saw a little bit of tweaking, right? I mean, after the map came out, we looked at the 2nd and the 3rd congressional district and said, hey, wait a second. Why did we keep the 3rd so safe and make that such a tough potential outcome in the 2nd district? And we were able to move a few more votes over there. But also thinking through how to sell this on the referendum, right? Because as of this airing, we'll be about halfway through early voting on this redistricting, but the outcome's certainly not a foregone conclusion as far as I'm concerned. I think it's going to be close. And so you went through, what are the pros and cons of showing the map ahead of time? Right. I think the pro is, hey, it's transparency. Look, this is what we're going to do. We want to be honest about all of it. The downside is, hey, I like the idea of a 10-1 map. I like the idea of balancing things out and canceling out what Trump's doing, but I don't want to lose my congressman. Right. Now that you've seen the map, you'll have some people that'll be torn. Like, I don't know that I like, or people like to see what it actually looks like. Right. And we do give some feel to the other side when they can pull out one of these weird looking districts and say, hey, does this shape look like democracy? Does this seem fair to you? And I do think that that's the downside of that. And so we had to balance those competing considerations as far as coming up with a strategy to how to do this. I think ultimately we thought that we wanted to be able to argue transparently about what we were doing.
Yeah, thanks.
So, Marcus, critics are going to say that sounds like a political and polite way of saying I'm gerrymandering. Are you?
Well, look, we are going to level the playing field, and sometimes you've got to bring the same tools, right? You can't bring the old saying, you can't bring a knife to a gunfight. What gerrymandering means? What being conscious of the political outcome, I suppose, in this day and age. I mean, there's all kinds of gerrymandering, as you know. I mean, there's been racial gerrymandering that was used for years to diminish the voting power of certain minority communities. But there's
which is illegal now. But political gerrymandering is legal.
Yeah, political gerrymandering, and the Supreme Court has said, if it's purely political, it's allowed. They've repeatedly upheld it. And so, again, whether you like that or not, whether you think that ought to be the law or not, we're dealing in reality here, and we're dealing with, frankly, the future health of our democracy. And if one side just sort of lays down their arms or turns the other cheek, or whatever analogy you want to use, you're going to get run over. And there's no, we can all sit back and post about how righteous we were, but when you lose voting power, you lose representation, you lose the ability to, frankly, have future elections, which I think is what's at stake here. I don't want to be too dramatic about it. Being on your moral high horse doesn't really help you a whole lot.
Not to put you on the spot, but, and I know you can handle it. So I heard this as, yes, we are gerrymandering, but one, it's legal, and two, it is fair so that we can, since we didn't start it, so that we can save democracy. Did I misquote you at all?
Again, gerrymandering is sort of a bad word, but it doesn't have to be. It's funny. Dick Sasson always used to say there's good gerrymandering and bad gerrymandering. Of course, the punchline was it's good when we do it and it's bad when they do it. But I do think, again, taking politics into consideration is a good end here, particularly when it's about making sure that the outcome of our national elections reflect the will of the people. And I think that's what democracy is all about.
Yep. All right. So the constitutional amendment is on the ballot. There's special election. Early voting started. Election day is April 21st. If this passes, and it needs a simple majority, right?
Yep, just a simple majority of the votes cast.
If the simple majority of Virginians vote yes, then there'll be new maps, new districts in November for Virginians to choose their representation in Congress. And instead of the current 6 Democrats, 5 Republicans that are there, you're anticipating, based on the new districts, 10 Democrats and 1 Republican that'll go to Congress for 3 terms. Did I get this correctly?
That's basically it. Yeah. Again, I mean, some of these are not slam dunk districts every year for the next cycle. I mean, I think if you're not running against Donald Trump, come 2030, some of these may be a little bit more difficult to maintain, but we'll have to see.
Excellent. We're running out of time. We took quite a bit of yours. I can spend another 30 minutes with the commander and you talking about different issues, but let's just bring it home for Mason a little bit. You represent part of the Fairfax area. For Mason students who, like most people in Northern Virginia, are turned into DC and barely follow Richmond, make the case. Why should they care about what happened and happens every session in Richmond?
Sure. I mean, look, I grew up the same way, right? I grew up here in Falls Church and McLean, went to McLean High School. My dad worked on K Street downtown, and I was very focused on the federal stuff. And then I got a job 20-some years ago, maybe 30-some now, working for a guy named Jim Scott as a legislative aide, making $13,000 a year. And I went with him to Richmond, which is a city I'd maybe visited once or twice, even though I'd grown up here in Virginia. And I watched from January, when we started introducing bills at the request of constituents to help fix like very real problems they were having. You watched it go to subcommittee and get reported out of committee and get to the floor all within about the first 30 days. Second 30 days, you repeated that process in the Senate. By April of that same year, the governor had signed it into law. And by July 1st, it was in fact the law. You could sit there, you could watch that whole process in a very digestible, time frame. Everybody, the most amazing thing to me, everybody was in their seats on the floor. If you ever watch C-SPAN, you see people giving speeches on the floor of Congress. They're speaking to an empty room and a camera. But we actually listened to each other. We were all there at the same time. And then you cast your vote. Like, you heard the arguments, you cast your vote in real time. And it's all a really accessible process. And so, my recommendation, focus in on that, because it's where you can make a difference. I think a lot of us, and a lot of, my kids are college age. My daughter's first year graduate school. My son's a sophomore at Virginia Tech. And a lot of times what's happening in the world feels overwhelming to them. And they're like, what's the point of doing any of this? What can I do? But when you go to Richmond, it's at a different scale. And because it's happening quicker and smaller, and you can be there to actually, make an important difference. And we've had folks that have come down and served as interns. That turns into a part-time job, which turns into a full-time job. We've had like deputy secretaries of cabinet level positions in their late 20s and early 30s, right? Making big decisions that really impact state government in big ways. So, I think, come be a big fish in a smaller pond in Richmond. Pay attention. And the things we do really matter. The other way I explain it is from the moment you back your car out of your driveway, right? Will you be able to back out of the driveway, or is the traffic going to be so gridlocked that you can't get out, right? To drop your kids off at school at a carpool line, and what size is the classroom that they're going to be going into? How many kids will there be there? Will they have when you have to then get to work, will you have to pay tolls to get there or not? And how much are they going to be? Is your employer going to have to offer you paid sick days or not? All those questions that will affect you like every moment of every day are made at the state level for the most part, and they're happening there. And you can be, get yourself, burrow in there and make yourself known, and you can impact all those decisions for a lot of people before very long. You don't have to wait till you're my age to make a difference.
Here at the Schar School, Marcus, we are working hard on creating experiential civics education. We have a pilot course that we developed that has a small budget item in the budget this year in Virginia. Delegate Griesek, Chairman Griesek carried it on the House side. Senator Marsden carried it on the Senate side. The money has been placed on both sides. We just need to come up to a good number in between them. Y'all on the House side were generous and put in $250,000 for us to do that. And the idea behind it is to get a couple hundred students to get experiential civic education through the General Assembly and local governments. So your support for that in the final run would be greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. I think it's great. And I think it's, we need those young, fresh, energetic, and talented folks, because they bring great ideas. And, we've been around for a while, but we can't think of things, and the world's changing. So
yes,
that youthful voice and knowledge and experience is really important.
Thank you. And we're hoping that after the pilot is funded by the state, that we're going to go to the feds and try to get a permanent money for it, to be not just a pilot, but a permanent center of civics, of experiential civics at George Mason. Before I ask the last question and close it out, Commander, do you have any final thoughts or questions for the chairman?
Well, I think the General Assembly had a role in protecting Dr. Gregory Washington when the Board of Visitors tried to oust him. And so I want to recognize that and show my appreciation for that.
No, absolutely. No, he's a great guy, and we definitely rallied to his side and on his behalf. And we know what a fine person he is, and again, that's one of these. It all goes together. At the state level, you get to know your university presidents. You get to know what kind of people they are. I think the folks nationally, don't understand the people that they're sometimes targeting. They see them as sort of very one-dimensional, and they say, "Oh, look, he's a woke guy who's doing DEI stuff," and it's like, that's not what it's about. It's not as simple as that, and there's a lot more to it. And we were able to help educate folks and come and make sure that he was treated the way he deserved to be, which was very well.
Thank you. Thank you for defending Mason, protecting Mason, and protecting our president. Final thoughts, Chairman Simon, the floor is yours. And please include how may your constituents and those of others in the area can and should get engaged with you?
Yeah, so it's a beautiful thing being part of a representative democracy, the oldest continuously meeting legislative body in the Western Hemisphere here, the House of Delegates, which I think is the upper house. Don't let the senators tell you otherwise. And I'd say that even if they were here. Stay engaged, get to know what your district you're in, right? Know who your representative is. It's amazing how easy and accessible we actually can be. Again, unlike some of the national figures that you see, call my office. I'm liable to call you back myself. Send an email. Let us know how you feel. Show up at town halls. You can show up, be one of like 30 or 40 people again, and have some real FaceTime with your elected officials if you show up. So step one is just educate yourself about who represents you at the state level and at the local level, who your representatives are, and be a squeaky wheel. It's not hard, again, to stand out from the crowd, because not a lot of people take the time and make the effort to make themselves known and make their wishes known. And you can have an outsized influence that way. And we need to hear from you too. And we need to be able to explain to folks from other parts of the state, hey, listen, I can't be with you on this, or we can't do this. My constituents won't let me get away with it, right? I'd like to be able to lean back and say, hey, listen, my district doesn't support that. And here's how I know. I've gotten 600 emails about this. I had 30 people come through my office. I had 100 people show up at my town hall last weekend to tell me, don't you dare. And that's really powerful for us when we need to make the case for protecting our community's values, our district's values at the state level. So you can always find me on my website, marcussimon.com. Very easy. It has all my contact information. All my social media connections are there. And all the best emails and phone numbers are right there at marcussimon.com.
And listeners, to find out who your legislator is, there's just go to Google and type "who is my legislator," and it'll take you to a website that the Legislative Services and General Assembly had created. You put in your address and tell you who your state delegate is, who your state senator is, who your congressman is, who your U.S. senators. I hope that you at least know those and know who they are. But as Delegate Simon said, they're accessible and available to reach out to and be engaged. Chairman Simon, thank you for joining us in the middle of session and helping us cut through the noise. Commander, thanks for co-hosting and helping bring the students and public service perspective into this discussion. For our listeners, we'll include links to the show, to redistricting referendum material, General Assembly resources, and session coverage, so you can follow this for yourself. You can find this and all episodes of Policy and Governance Perspectives at char.gmu.edu/podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Dr. David Ramadan. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep one eye on Richmond.
That brings us to the end of another insightful episode of Policy and Governance Perspectives. We truly appreciate you joining us for these important discussions featuring voices from across the Schar School. For more information and to explore our archive of past episodes, please visit char.gmu.edu/podcast. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to sharing more with you next time.